Good evening, and welcome to our program. Today, I'm Ed McQueen, your host, of course. My sister April couldn't make it. If most of you know, she is on the tail end of or honeymoon of her marriage. And we'll start out with congratulations to her and wishing her the well. I know she's having a good time. I know that. I know she's having a good time. So, but anyway, we have a special, an issue that has been out in the forefront in Horry County for a while, and we thought it was wise to really get into it and find out what's missing. Okay, in other words, and kind of just give a deeper scenario of what's going on the issue of domestic violence. So we're going to get right into it. And our guest today has dealt with the issue, I believe, to a great extent. He, along with the Solicitor General, Solicitor of Horry County. But we have him here today, and he's going to give us just a bit more in depth as to what's going on now, and if this is applicable to you, or our audience who we're talking to, then please take note. Okay. So, good evening to Mr. Chief Deputy of the Horry County Sheriff's Office, Chief Deputy Tom Fox. And Tom, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We're certainly glad to have you because this is an issue that's really not talked about a lot, and we just don't, but it's there, okay? And with the information I think that you can provide today, it's going to give us a little bit more in depth so it can carry us a little bit further into the issue of domestic violence. So I have a number of them myself, but I'd like to just start off by you explaining to us why this is the role of the sheriff department takes to, I don't know if they take the lead or not, but certainly it's an intricate part of addressing the issue of domestic violence. And you can at the same time introduce yourself as to what you do there and your role as a chief deputy of the Horry County Sheriff's Department.
Well, thank you, Edward. The Sheriff's Office role is primarily providing support. I'm currently Vice Chairman of the Family Justice Center of Georgetown and Horry Counties, which is our domestic violence shelter for Georgetown and Horry Counties. I've been on the board this is my third year, and we're primarily in a project right now to build a shelter for victims of domestic violence in Horry County. Typically, the Family Justice Center services around 1,700 people a year, and 70% or 72% of that on average are from Horry County, and there is no shelter in Horry County. So if a victim needs assistance, they have to be transported to Georgetown County line, and they transport them back into the city of Georgetown. It's a very small shelter. It only has 3 bedrooms, and we're currently in the design phase. We're in the final phase of design on an over $1 million project to build a shelter in Horry County that will have significant office space to provide services to the victims, and also a housing space that will accommodate 14 bedrooms. So we'll be able to grow into it as domestic violence rises with the increase in population of Horry County. So that's why we're involved.
Okay, yeah, those are interesting things. And now I guess we want to talk about a time frame for some of those things to be implemented or come into fruition, and how it's budgeted and so forth. Does that seem to be a challenge?
Well, it's been a challenge to get through the design phase, but we're 98% complete. We just have some structural drawings that have to be completed. We've had some setbacks there, but we were very fortunate that we've had representatives in the area that was able to get $1.5 million from the state of South Carolina to build the shelter. And all we're waiting for now is once we get the drawings, we'll submit them to code enforcement for approval, and we'll put out a bid process for construction, hire a general contractor, and break some ground. We also were very fortunate enough to have a local family donate an acre of land to build it on. So we're already ahead of the game. Once we get the drawings, we're going to go 100% full force, get that building put up, and start providing services for the victims of domestic violence in our county.
So it looks like you're all on the move anyway. So I guess I couldn't pull an estimated time out of you. Are you talking about next year?
Yeah, hopefully by the first part of next year, we'll be able to open doors. That's our plan right now. We've been working on it for about 18 months, planning in the last year, just getting the proper drawings in place. We made some adjustments, and now I think we've got everything we need. We're just waiting on just a small portion of the structural design to be completed.
Okay, so did you give a location, by the way?
It's going to be in between Myrtle Beach and Conway. It's a central location. It'll be accessible, easy for law enforcement to drop off people that need to be sheltered. We're not going to give out the location right now.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll buy that. So, but now I kind of delved into some statistics myself as I was doing research on the topic, and it said that South Carolina was, I believe, ranked. One place I saw it ranked 7th among all the states with respect to the percentage of females who experienced intimate partner violence at some point during their lifetime. And some other place I saw where it was ranked the 6th in that category. So what are we up against here? Is that high? For example, ranking 6th.
Well, what I think what you're referring to is we ranked 6th in the nation for domestic violence deaths.
Okay.
People that actually die as a result of domestic violence incident. And we've been in the top 10 for the last 20 years. South Carolina is 23rd in population. So we're the 23rd populous state in the nation, but we consistently rank in the top 10 for victims of domestic violence that result in death. We have been number 1 for 1 year. Last year, we were 6. So what that breaks down is basically it's about, I think it's about 2.15 per 100,000 people in South Carolina. Victims die as a result of domestic violence. And the greater majority of the victims of domestic violence are females. We do have male clients that seek services from the Family Justice Center, but by far, domestic violence affects the females. Now, it's not just the females, it's the whole family unit that is affected by it. The children, obviously, if a domestic violence situation happens and you have to shelter the family, the children have to be displaced, taken out of their local school, placed into a shelter. It causes just disruption for the family. So not having one in Horry County, sometimes victims don't want to be transported. They don't seek services. So our hope is to that once we have our facility built, that more victims will seek shelter, seek the services, the protection of the Family Justice Center. And that's, in the long run, that's what we need to do to prevent violence. Because if a victim stays in an abusive environment, it only escalates. It may start with something minor like a threat, then it escalates to physical violence. And then again, it's like we said, it can escalate to even death. So it's very important that victims have services available to them and readily available to them to get them out of that environment and get them out of that home and put them into a situation where we can provide legal services for them to get orders of protection, to keep the suspect away from them, the abuser away from them, and to provide them with protection as far as giving them financial assistance to get them in a place for permanent housing eventually.
So I know the sheriff's department plays a role in this, but is that the primary responsibility? Is that the primary department that one should seek for domestic violence?
Well, domestic violence in our area, yes. Now, if somebody is a victim of domestic violence, which includes not only physical abuse, but it can be threats, it can be psychological threats or intimidation, it can be threats involving in front of a child. It can be taking somebody's cell phone away so they can't call the police. There's all different levels, but they should call 911 or have someone call 911. They need to get away from the situation because no one deserves to go through that. And the longer they stay, the more abusive the offender becomes. It gives them a green light to show their power over them. And basically, violence against women or violence against men in a domestic situation has to do with power. So they need to get away from it as soon as possible, or at least call and get it reported so you have a police report on record. So if it continues, you can seek protection and that the law enforcement can respond and arrest the offender.
So you mentioned that you provide legal services. Is that free?
Yes, it is. It is through the Family Justice Center. Yes.
And just a little bit more about the Family Justice Center. It's located for Horry and Georgetown counties, or?
Yes. Yes. And I think we got a slide with the number, but if you are in crisis, you just dial 844-208-0161. That is a 24-hour staffed hotline that will provide you with immediate assistance as far as seeking shelter. But if you are harmed or you are a victim of domestic violence, you need to call 911. Somebody needs to get the police there to intervene before it escalates.
Okay, so the dialing the number of 844-208-0161, that's not just an emergency situation. The emergency case is when they should just dial 911 first, right?
Correct. Yes. Dial 911 first. Then now, if let's say you've left the residence or left the apartment and you're seeking shelter with a family member or a friend, you're getting away from the situation, then call the crisis hotline. They'll work you through what you need to do as far as getting an order protected. We have advocates that supply services that are stationed right here in the judicial complex. It'll get you in front of a family court judge, get your order of protection, and provide some levels of protection for you. So if you're away, call the hotline. But if you're in harm's way, call 911.
Harm's way. Okay. So you and I were talking beforehand, before the program had begun. One of the things of interest that I saw was said 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men. Okay, now again, as the men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. I think this is a national statistic. Is that correct? Or we're not talking about just
yeah, that's a national statistic, but obviously, it's probably marginally a little bit more for our area,
right?
And for the state of South Carolina, because we rank 23rd in the nation for population, and we're 6th in the nation for deaths involving domestic violence incidents. So that shows there's a proliferation of domestic violence in South Carolina. And there always has been in Horry County. I mean, they have several cases, over 1,000 cases on average every year pending at the solicitor's office for domestic violence prosecutions.
So I know it's probably y'all's role not to go as deep as finding out or investigating the reason behind these violent cases, but do you have a sense of? I'm sure you do, but can you articulate what you think some of the primary reasons behind domestic violence?
Well, I can tell you that the majority of cases involving domestic violence involve someone using alcohol or drugs that causes them to become violent, or to use their common sense or senses to not harm another person. So there's going to be some form of alcohol or narcotics involved in it, or some types of abuse of alcohol or narcotics that are involved in it. That's a factor. And whenever you have that available, you're going to have that. But domestic violence, if it's tolerated within the generation, it's a learned behavior for a male. If they've seen their daddy and granddaddy beat their spouses, there's a high likelihood that they're going to accept that behavior as a common behavior, and they're going to be their intimate partners, or physically harm them or psychologically torture them. So if you have a high number of historical cases of it, and there hasn't been a significant reduction, so mathematically you're going to breed more abusers just because it's considered an accepted behavior. Domestic violence is all about power. It's not about love. It's power over another person, whether it be jealousy, whether it be financial issues, whether it be just somebody just wants to have control over somebody. It typically revolves around trying to possess and power over somebody. So that can happen because of socioeconomic conditions. There is a higher percentage of domestic violence in lower socioeconomic environments. And that can be related to, like I said, it could be related to historical issues of fathers and grandfathers that abused their spouses, or it can be just the stress of the environment, of the financial stress, the stress of fatherless children, and people showing up when they want to in a fatherless home and trying to dominate over the mother, or vice versa, or the mother trying to dominate over the father in a single home. There's several factors that play into domestic violence, but it's basically an issue of someone trying to possess power over another person.
So do you feel that you have adequate personnel to address, since South Carolina is rated pretty high up there with domestic violence? You think that you have adequate personnel to address all these issues? And I take it that you all are doing a pretty good job at it. I don't hear anything else.
Well, I can tell you, law enforcement does not take a domestic call lightly. It's one of the most violent calls that a law enforcement officer faces. Other than a traffic stop, a domestic violence call is probably one of the most dangerous situations a law enforcement officer approaches. You've got a heated environment. You're going into someone's home. You don't know if there's weapons available, and it can cause problems. I mean, I can give you two examples right off the top of my head. One's happened a little while ago, back in 2001, December 29th of 2001. Lieutenant Randy Gerald was driving home from the detention center down 701 North and came upon a victim of domestic violence, where a young man was pointing a gun at a girl's head. He was in his personal vehicle. He pulled up and was in uniform, and before he could get his foot off the clutch, the young man ran over and shot and killed him 3 times. So we lost a lieutenant in 2001. And 2 years ago, Patrolman Jacob Hancher with Myrtle Beach Police Department responded to a domestic violence call in Myrtle Beach, and when he was walking towards the building, was shot to death by a suspect that was in the home. So domestic violence is a very violent situation for officers to have to deal with. That's one of the reasons why you try to get the victim away from the abuser, because if you don't, every law enforcement officer knows they're going back that night. If nothing happens, they're going back that night. That's why South Carolina law requires a must arrest if it meets certain criteria, like signs of physical abuse, psychological abuse, threats. It's a must arrest situation, so that whoever the perpetrator is going to go to jail.
You previously presented some statistics, and I'd like to show these to the audience, and we may have touched base on some of them, but just let me show one. That is, these are by the way, these are 2022 statistics. Served 1,300 people and served 455 clients in housing needs. When you say housing needs, can you kind of like go in depth as to particularly what you're talking about?
That's basically when somebody's like, involved in a domestic violence situation and they want to leave. The Family Justice Center will provide housing either at their shelter in Georgetown, or they'll provide temporary housing at a selected hotel, anything to get them out of the home, to get them out of that environment. So that's what that means.
Okay. As it stands, what's the capacity of the shelter that's being promoted? The one in Georgetown, I don't know what. Can you give us a little bit about that one also?
Yeah, the one in Georgetown only has 3 bedrooms. So typically, if it's full, then it'll be housing them at a contracted hotel. The one in Georgetown, the one in Horry County, is designed to have 14 bedrooms. So I think we'll be well within capacity to house the victims of domestic violence here in Horry County. And if they have overflow in Georgetown County, we'll be able to handle it.
So what are the limitations once you get them in? Are they limited to like a week, month, or whatever?
It can be up to a month. Well, it's basically temporary housing. As we work them through the judicial process and provide legal aid to them to get them orders of protection or whatever they need to assist them in a bond hearing, whatever is required if the suspect's arrested, it's just temporary housing. We'll work with other agents, nonprofits, and other agencies in Horry and Georgetown County to try to provide them with permanent housing.
So Georgetown has had its shelter for some time, I suppose.
Yes.
Do you have more domestic violence there than Horry County?
No, typically only of clients that are served, about 72% come from Horry County. So there's a lot higher, because basically based on the population.
Let me read one other statistic that I've anticipated, or I've gotten. Since nearly 20% of marriages and intimate partnerships will experience physical violence, and according to the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy.
Right.
Does Horry County kind of fit into there somewhere?
Yeah, we're definitely in there, and if not a little bit above, definitely in that.
Wow. They also asked the question of which type of abuse is the hardest to detect. And they listed one as emotional or psychological abuse.
Correct. It's because there's no physical signs readily available when an officer responds to the call. And I'm gonna tell you, there's a majority of the times when you show up, somebody can have a bloody nose, broken wrist, broken arm, and they don't want the person that did it arrested. A lot of the times, the person that did it is the main breadwinner for the family. they're looking at, well, what am I going to do for money? And they're kind of trapped. And sometimes the person, the abuser, will threaten them, say, if you call the police, I'm going to take the kids. If you call the police, I'm going to take your car keys. If you call the police, I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to cancel the joint bank account and take my money and put it in. There's a lot of psychological things that can be said to a victim that can prevent them from calling the police.
Yeah, those are that's very good information that you propagating, I believe, so far. And I'm a little in awe about the role that your department plays, because I recall being on the news one time that the solicitor Richardson, took the lead seemingly to explain to the audience about the issue of domestic violence in Horry County. Does that office carry the load along with you all, or you working in tandem?
That's where they end up. That's where the perpetrators end up. They end up under the solicitor's office prosecution. They have a domestic violence court. They have people that are designated and specialized in prosecuting domestic violence cases. So I think we're only one of two courts in the state, one of two counties that has a designated domestic violence court. So the solicitor Richardson and the staff have put a lot of resources into prosecuting cases. One of the main problems with after arrest of domestic violence is the victims often try to drop the charges, and it's because of those factors I said, because they don't have a place to stay, they need the money, they don't want to uproot their children. They want to give somebody a second chance. So there's a lot of resources that need to be laid out to assist the victims to make sure that they follow through. But oftentimes victims change their mind for various reasons. And the solicitor's office has to work through that. Their numbers would be a little bit higher, I believe, if everybody prosecuted everybody that was a victim.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. Another commenter sent in, said, could you speak a little more on the criteria of the South Carolina law must arrest?
Right. If there's signs of physical abuse, somebody's going to jail. Now, if there's signs of mutual combat where both people were fighting, more than often, both people are going to go to jail. So it's up to the discretion of the law enforcement officer. There's a lot of factors they have to consider. They have to obviously they got to listen to both sides, and they have to make a determination. Obviously, if one person is only the person that's got the black eye and the bloody nose, and the other person's got the blood on their hands, it's pretty simple. The facts are right there. I mean, the fact pattern is somebody hit somebody in the face and somebody's going to jail. But it is required that law enforcement agencies, if there's a sign of the violation of statute, that they arrest.
Okay, so they don't have to sign a warrant or something, a charge, to let you know that the victim wants that person to go to jail. Because
if they respond and there's a victim present, they're going to take somebody to jail.
Okay.
And but now, if it's an incident where the victim leaves the scene and later wants to report it, they call the police. Then they'd go to the magistrate and take out a warrant if there's significant evidence to prove that.
Okay,
but once they get to the scene, they have to make that determination.
Right.
If there's not evidence there or a fact pattern there that proves it or shows that domestic violence occurred, then it's up to the discretion of the officer.
One other statistic that the question was asked: what is the rate of domestic violence in South Carolina? I think you pretty much answered that for the most part. But here, we read off some statistics that said, um, in addition to South Carolina ranking the seventh, said about 42% of females and 29% of males in South Carolina expected to experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime at least one time.
Yes. Yes. That's correct. That's what it is for South Carolina.
Wow.
I would have to ask if there anybody out there that doesn't know somebody that's been a victim of domestic violence. That's rare. I think we all know more than one or at least one person that's been in an abusive relationship and has been a victim. Now, the end results have been differently. Some people just don't call the police. They put up with it for years, and eventually they just get a divorce, so they're not arrested for domestic violence. And
Right.
some people seek help from their families, and their families advise them not to. So those particular statistics are only reported incidents of domestic violence. I would fair to say that there's probably more than that. There's more victims out there that just for other reasons never reported it and either left their spouse or significant other or the relationship, and it's gone unreported.
Wow. You know, I don't know why I'm so intrigued that seems like the local police do they get training, not sheriff department, but local 911 police? Do they get training?
Yes,
Okay.
they get trained. They'll get trained at the police academy. Everybody in South Carolina goes to the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy for their certification. And they have live scenarios where they'll have domestic violence scenarios that they go through. They're trained in the law, the legal steps that have to be taken. And then they put them into live scenarios where they responded to domestic violence calls, and they run them through that for at least a week on different scenarios, but some of the majority of them are domestic violence calls.
Would you say that addressing domestic violence by local police or the sheriff department, would you categorize that as dangerous?
I think it's one of the most dangerous situations for an officer. It is, because you're going into a very emotional, heated environment,
Right.
in another person's home, and you don't know where the weapons are, what's present, and sometimes you don't know how the victim's going to react. So it's one of the most dangerous calls that a law enforcement officer goes on.
I revert to what you just said about somebody's going to jail if there's a bloody nose someplace or black eye. But I've seen cases, I guess, when I was growing up in my neighborhood where the female, usually in that case, could have the worst of abuse on her body, and yet she doesn't want to file charges. And during that time, they accepted that.
Right.
Because they would ask the question, do you want us to take him now and go to jail? And she'll say
Right.
no.
Right.
So
that's changed.
That's changed.
That's
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not up to the discretion of the victim. That was how it was in the old days. I mean, I've been in this business for 43 years. I can remember a lot of bloody noses where a lot of victims have said, no, I don't want you to take them. And I can remember handcuffing husbands or boyfriends and having the wife fight me on the way out the door to not take them. So, or the girlfriend. So it is a dangerous call. But I mean, because of the amount of deaths and the fact that we're ranked typically in the top 10 in the United States for domestic violence deaths, the legislature has taken it seriously, and they've enacted some really good laws to prosecute domestic violence offenders.
Okay, so has that been proven to be the best way to do it? Is to change from the scenario that I just presented?
Yes.
It's been proven to be the best way is to take somebody down to jail.
Yeah, That's the best way. That's the best way to separate the situation. Like I said, you're going to end up, if you don't, you're going to end up going back. The police officer is going to put himself back in that environment. Years ago, it wouldn't be, I mean, you might go back 3 or 4 times a night. But now you go once, and if there's stuff, if there's evidence there that there's somebody's been abusing another person, somebody's going to jail. And that prevents the officers from having to go back, but also protects the victim. Because it gets worse. The beatings don't get any lighter. They get worse. If you allow somebody to slap you, the next time they're going to hit you. And if you allow them to hit you, the next time they're going to break something. Or they're going to slap a child. Or they're going to abuse your children. So you need to get out of that environment.
So, Chief Fox, what kind of cost are we talking about here when you start dealing with domestic violence on an annual basis?
There was a study done recently that said it, in South Carolina, on an annual basis, the total cost, which includes everything from housing to court costs to anything that's related to domestic violence, it runs around $360 million a year. That's a lot of money. I mean, for something that shouldn't happen to begin with. So ultimately, nonprofits pay for it, or your tax dollars pay for it by the arrest, the booking, the housing in the jail, the bond hearing, the prosecution. It's an unnecessary expense, I believe. But
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Now, is there any kind of partnership with an entity, a nonprofit entity, for example, that could head off the abuse in general, like providing employment, something, or because I think 9 times out of 10, finances is the bottom reason for a lot of this, right?
I agree. I mean, that puts a lot of strain on a family. The fact that you struggle from day to day and to survive. There are resources. I mean, plenty of resources places. We have locally, I think one of the best resources is called A Father's Place. They teach parenting. They provide resources. They network fathers with job opportunities. But one of the best things they teach them is the responsibility of being a father. It's an awesome responsibility that many men walk away from, and many men abuse their wives or their girlfriends. So one of the local ones is the Father's Place is a great resource to provide mentorship, job opportunities, and to grow people into being good fathers.
Well, since it sounds to me like that's rather an indirect partnership there. How does the sheriff department interact with, for example, Father's Place? Do you provide each other just information, or are there resources that can be interchanged or whatever?
One of the ways we provide it is we provide it to the inmates at the jail that are in the jail. We provide resources directly to them to give them access to the people, that volunteers that come into the jail to speak with them. So we got a captive audience, obviously, when somebody's in jail, but so we provide those resources. And the Father's Place is connected to all the nonprofits in our area that has to do with any type of job opportunities. If people just need mentoring to become a better father, but also to reduce domestic violence. That's part of the strategy of teaching somebody to be a good parent is not to be a violent parent.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I received high accolades for the Father's Place, and they they are to me they ought to be commended on that. Um, it's an awesome program, my understanding, and the World Community Magazine has dealt with them for a number of number of years now, and the outcome has always been just excellent. You know,
Yeah.
with a lot of respect there for the Father's Place. So, getting to another statistic says uh, a woman is beaten by her husband or boyfriend every 15 seconds in the United States.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Based on the numbers, the millions of victims every year. Yeah, that's probably very accurate.
So, yeah, so you're saying that even South Carolina is along in that same statistic?
Well,
Not
they're
South Carolina,
lumping,
Horry County. I'm talking about. Let's just deal with Horry County.
not Horry County. I wouldn't say that.
Okay, South Carolina.
They're just lumping into to all 50 states
Right.
based on that, the number of arrests and the number of calls. Um, it's not uncommon for the combined law enforcement agencies, Horry County Police, Myrtle Beach Police, North Myrtle Beach, Surfside, Loris, Ainer, to probably respond to 15 to 20 domestic violence calls in a 24-hour period.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, that's pretty startling statistics there.
Yeah. Well, we have
Yeah.
a lot of jurisdictions
Yeah,
in Horry
right.
County, and there's a lot of calls, and that's just an estimate off the top of my head, but it's not just a Horry County problem. And Myrtle Beach has it, North Myrtle Beach, Surfside, everybody has it. Even the rural areas, Loris and Ainer, that's a call that they dread to get. It's one of those things. It's one of the most like we discussed. It's one of the most dangerous calls. That's why dispatch is going to send at least 2 officers to that call.
Okay, because it could get dangerous.
Yes.
Okay. You know, these the things that you presented, I certainly hope that the audience is paying close attention to because this is a crucial issue. Okay, whether it be Horry County or any part of South Carolina. I mean, a lot of us grew up with neighbors showing neighbors as being abused and stuff like that. And I, for one, just concluded that I don't ever want to be in a situation like that. I just don't, you know. Of course, a lot of people are just walking away, right?
Right.
But like you said, sometimes the situation is such that you just monetary issues come into play, and that increases the difficulty there.
Right. Well, my best advice is no one has the right to strike somebody, especially a spouse, significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend. There's nothing in the world that justifies domestic violence. And the unfortunate thing of domestic violence is a lot of the time you have children that witness it. They're witnessing daddy or mommy beating on whatever, and it causes psychological damage to the children, low self-esteem. So there's more than just one person getting hit there. If that child's never struck and all they've done is seen it, it causes enormous psychological damage to that child. So before somebody thinks it's okay to strike somebody in front of a child, remember, they're not going to forget that. They're going to carry that with them for the rest of their life. It's not the physical scars that hurt families, it's the psychological damage of domestic violence.
Okay, Chief Fox, the one other statistic was, let me, if I can convey this, said that businesses, and pretty soon I guess we can relate this to businesses in Oregon. They spend $5 billion a year on medical expenses related to domestic violence, and another 100 million due to lost wages, absenteeism, and employee turnover. And this is from the Domestic Violence for Healthcare Providers in Colorado Domestic Violence Coalition. I know you've already spilled out some statistics about what it costs from statewide, but you're talking about $5 billion a year on medical expenses. A lot of people don't have, well, not just the people, but some counties would run out of money for stuff like that.
Right.
So what do you do in cases like that?
Well, there's financial assistance to the Family Justice Center to provide assistance with that, but it's also done through the court system. There's restitution. Our solicitor will aggressively go after the perpetrator that victimizes somebody in domestic violence. In part of the sentence will be restitution to pay for medical bills and other items that they cause damage to.
Now, I'm going to assume, and just diverge a little bit, I'm going to assume that when you start talking with, for example, a woman that's pregnant, solicitor will probably deal more harshly with a case like that, now, wouldn't he?
I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, because you talk about a vulnerable person physically,
right?
Well, I mean, you can't find more vulnerable person that I know of other than a child that's actually present. But I mean, the child is still present. It's present
Right.
in the womb.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would hope that they would, and I know they would. Our solicitor's office is very aggressive in prosecution of domestic violence cases.
That's and the old deal very closely with the main office in South Carolina. Do you all have constant communication or constant conferences on that? Has it gotten to that point where it deserves forums and constants and big meetings, statewide meetings on that issue in South Carolina?
Well, South Carolina is very aggressive in funding grants for not only victim advocates but domestic violence investigators at the local police departments. There's a lot of federal funds that pass through South Carolina, victims of violence grants and domestic violence grants. And South Carolina puts a big emphasis on providing grant money. Matter of fact, part of that grant money goes to help fund the Family Justice Center. So South Carolina has got a grip on it, and they do meet. The victim advocates meet, the prosecutors meet. They're trained on it every year. It's one of the key components of law enforcement training. So South Carolina is very aggressive in dealing with domestic violence. Unfortunately, we just stay in the top 10 in the United States for deaths resulting from domestic violence.
Since we're staying in the top 10, would you attribute that greatly to the socioeconomic status of most places in South Carolina?
I would think that is a contributing factor. Yeah, I really do. A lot of stress on families. A lot of stress on families that don't have any incomes. And there's a lot of stress on families that don't have fathers. The fathers show up and try to dominate a family when they have men there, and it can create problems. But I mean, it's a syncytial disease. It goes from fathers to children, and it's generational if it's not stopped. It's like any other behavior in the family. I mean, unless somebody puts a stop to it at some point, the young men in the family adapt the behavior of their parents. And if they got a parent that's an abusive parent, that could be beating their spouses or girlfriends, it's not long before they're going to be beating the kids. So it's a cycle that has to be stopped, and that starts in the home. It starts with the victim. It starts with who's ever being abused to put an end to it by calling 911, by seeking services, by getting out of that situation and getting your children to a safe place, and letting your children know that there is a consequence if somebody hits them. So that's important, and I think that needs to be shared.
Okay, we have another comment from our viewers, and Ms. Priscilla Fuller asked, what additional penalties are placed on repeat offenders on domestic violence?
I'm gonna have to look at that, but you got you got 4 levels of domestic violence. You got 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, 3 being the minor, 2 being next, and the 1. Then you have domestic violence of assault and high and aggravated nature, which is the most severe. But 2 and 3 and those are all increased penalties for convictions. So domestic violence, 2nd, 3rd, has an increased penalty for somebody that's found guilty. It's built into the statute. Hopefully that the judges they use that. And one of the most important factors is it's a federal law that if anybody's convicted of domestic violence, they can no longer possess a firearm or ammunition. But it's built into the statute that different tiers of sentencing for repeat offenders.
So it's considered a felony, I guess.
It can be at the highest level, right? But domestic violence, the first level is 3rd is not. It's a misdemeanor, but it's a misdemeanor that carries. If you have a conviction, they can no longer possess a firearm or ammunition. That turns into a felony. If they're found in possession of a firearm under the federal guidelines, then it's a felony.
Now, it's the difference between just having possession of a firearm or in the act of a firearm.
Right. Now, if you have a weapon that you're using in the act of if you have a firearm, it automatically sends it up to domestic violence, high and aggravated. A weapon, club, knife, whatever, could be domestic violence 3rd, which is enhanced. Now, domestic violence, high and aggravated, carries a sentence of 20 years.
So what comes under that? High and aggravated? There's some terrible assault.
Let's hear this: use of a deadly weapon, choking of the alleged victim until they lose consciousness, committing the offense in the presence of a minor, if the alleged victim is pregnant, if the offense is committed during a robbery or kidnapping or theft, or if the suspect prevents the alleged victim from accessing a telephone or cell phone.
Man,
We're all 3 factors.
all 3 factors there.
Right.
That's-
That'll be determined by the responding officer that makes the arrest. He's been trained. He'll know the elements, and if it makes its way to the solicitor's office, they'll either enhance it or drop it, based on the fact pattern or the facts of the case. But yes, there are penalties for repeat offenders.
So a general an offense like that, does that mean that the perpetrator will not be able to own a gun or firearm anymore?
For any convictions of domestic violence, any of them, any of the 4, yes. Domestic violence, 3, 2nd, 1st, and high and aggravated.
And if they're found guilty of that, what's the penalty for that? If they decide to, if they find them with a firearm after they've been placed on the list of
Well, it's a separate charge.
Okay.
That's yeah, firearm possession of a felon. I mean, so it
Yeah.
would
Okay. Yeah.
it changes, but like third, you get up to 90 days for domestic third, which is the most minor of the charges. I have to look here. Second is 3 years, up to 3 years. And then if you've had a domestic violence conviction in the last 10 years, it automatically brings you up to the domestic violence second. So in domestic violence third is up to 10 years. And it has great bodily harm, the conviction of within 10 years of prior conviction, violating protection order, using a firearm, presence of a minor, victim pregnant, and robbery, basically the same things as high and aggravated. So there are graduated consequences for people that continue to be arrested for domestic violence.
So let's talk about some other consequences that will impact the taxpayer and a lot of other people with the absence of the perpetrator of domestic violence. For example, if it's the man and he's half of the bread, no, he may not be the breadwinner, but he's supplying a lot of what needs to be done for the house, to keep the household going. How is that dealt with? What is suggested there? Because a lot of people are going to be impacted, taxpayers and everybody else, with his absence, because she's going to now be asking for public assistance,
right,
for lack of income.
Right. If he stays in jail or gets convicted and goes to jail, obviously he's not going to be able to provide financial assistance. There's different avenues. The victim advocates will provide them with different avenues to seek assistance, either if it's through the Department of Social Services or other agencies that they refer them to. But there are funds available through the state to provide assistance.
And it's, do they feel that will they be compensated on an equal basis? And in other words, adequately?
I don't think anybody's ever. I mean, I don't think they can put a factor on that. I mean, obviously, if it goes to family court and there's a divorce involved, it'll be adequate. I mean, the judge will make that decision. But until that time, they're going to have to. They're at the mercy of whatever agency this can provide the assistance. They can never get them whole again, but they can get them near to whole.
Okay.
There's a lot of nonprofits available out there.
Yeah.
That'll provide assistance.
Okay. Well, okay. Look, Chief, I will say that you provided a wealth of statistical data and information that I think could be very helpful to victims and people who consider themselves potential victims of domestic violence. So we certainly appreciate your time of coming on our program and you know, kind of expanding on what was publicly known, which was a little bit and not as much as what you've granted us today. So, but thank you so much again. And you have any last minute remarks? We have some people still commenting on it. So thanking you for clarifying the concerns.
Well, I just want to thank you for bringing this to the forefront. This is one of those topics that people try to avoid in society. It's been tolerated for years, and we have to stop it at some point. So this venue and your efforts and what you've done in the community to provide this information is a very valuable resource. And I want to thank Edward. I want to thank you and this organization for bringing this to the forefront.
Well, that's our duty here to do that and to make sure that society or community is sustainable in terms of functioning, you know.
Right.
So, one thing we didn't talk about, and I guess we can hit on another time, and that is the mental abuse,
Right.
domestic mental abuse. That can be rough.
Psychological abuse is very present in situations like that.
Right. But they all come under the umbrella of what we discussed for the past
Yes.
hour or so. But anyway, good. Thank you so much again, Chief Fox. And if you feel like there's more information in the near future and statistics that you want to share with the community, we're worldwide, we're nationwide. So because we're on Facebook and our website, please feel free to do so. And we're here to accommodate that kind of information. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You're welcome. So there you have it. And we certainly appreciate Chief Fox again for coming in and spending that kind of time with us. Chief Fox has been with the Old Recon Sheriff Department almost 30 years, my understanding. And I didn't get him to talk about that, but I think that he's been with the Sheriff Department for a long time. So until next week, again, we want you to please stay tuned for our latest edition of the World Community Magazine. We've sent them out nationally and on in our data bank. Hopefully it has reached everyone. May not be on our Facebook yet, but and the hard copies are for sale. If you want to subscribe for the hard copies, please do so. So until next week, same time, we're going to have another guest for you to spill out some more information that's going to be readily valuable to all our community concerns. Okay. So till next week, Godspeed and good night.